Let me tell you something. Some of the deepest wounds in life are not caused by betrayal, rejection, or loss. They are caused by the moment reality collides with illusion. A person trusted completely reveals a side that was never expected. Someone admired for their character falls short of the image built around them, and suddenly the pain feels far greater than the situation itself. Not because reality became harsher, but because the story believed about reality was stronger than the truth. Few experiences are more unsettling than realizing that much of human suffering begins not with what people do, but with what the mind quietly assumes about them. The monk understood this long before modern psychology existed. They taught that suffering often comes not from events themselves, but from the judgments attached to them. Human beings are complex, capable of wisdom and foolishness, kindness and selfishness, loyalty and weakness. Yet the mind resists complexity. It prefers certainty. It prefers clear answers. So it turns ordinary people into symbols, ideals, and expectations. The moment those expectations break, reality feels cruel. But reality did not change. The illusion did. And hidden inside that disappointment is something most people overlook. A rare opportunity to see more clearly. Because the day illusions begin to fall apart is often the day understanding begins. Not only about other people, but about ourselves. The assumptions we make, the stories we create, the expectations we quietly carry. Clarity can be uncomfortable at first, yet it remains the foundation of genuine freedom. And once that clarity arrives, it becomes impossible to see people and life the same way again. Most disappointments arrive long before the event that seems to cause them. They begin quietly, almost invisibly, in the private space of expectation. A person enters our lives and without realizing it, we start adding details that were never actually there. We see a few admirable qualities and assume the rest of the character matches. We witness a moment of kindness and imagine a permanently kind person. We hear words that sound sincere and assume they are supported by equal levels of wisdom, loyalty, or maturity. None of this feels deliberate. It happens so naturally that we rarely notice it. The mind dislikes uncertainty. It prefers a complete picture, even when the available information is incomplete. So it fills in the gaps. It creates a version of reality that feels coherent and comforting. Then one day, reality reveals a detail that does not fit the image we created. Suddenly, what seems stable begins to crack. This is why disappointment can feel so personal. On the surface, it appears that another person has failed us. They acted differently than expected. They made a choice we did not anticipate. They revealed a side of themselves that does not align with the image we carried. Yet beneath that reaction is often something deeper. The pain is not only about what they did. It is also about the story that can no longer survive. A future imagined begins to dissolve. A belief carefully protected starts losing its foundation. The monk understood that emotional suffering often comes from confusing what is within our control with what is not. Another person's character, choices, emotions, and development belong to them. Yet many people build their peace on the assumption that these things will unfold according to their hopes. When reality refuses to cooperate, disappointment follows. The result feels unfair, but reality was never obligated to follow expectations. This becomes especially clear in relationships. People often become attached not only to who someone is, but to who they might become. Potential can be incredibly persuasive. It invites the imagination to participate. A person may show glimpses of discipline, kindness, or emotional growth, and those glimpses become the foundation for a larger vision. Soon, the future version of that person becomes more emotionally significant than the present one. Attention shifts away from what is consistently demonstrated and toward what could eventually emerge. There is a certain comfort in this process because it allows hope to take center stage. Hope itself is not the problem. The difficulty begins when hope quietly transforms into expectation. What was once a possibility becomes something we believe should happen. Then the future arrives, and instead of becoming the person we imagined, they remain exactly where they are. The disappointment that follows can feel enormous because the loss exists not only in reality, but in imagination as well. Many people spend years carrying versions of others inside their minds that have little connection to who those people truly are. They interpret behavior generously when it supports the image and ignore evidence when it challenges it. Small warnings are explained away, contradictions are minimized, patterns are dismissed as temporary exceptions. This is not always because someone is naive. Often, It is because acknowledging reality would require letting go of a comforting narrative. As Epictetus observed, men are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them. Human beings naturally resist losses, and few losses feel more subtle than the loss of an expectation. There is no visible event to mourn, nothing tangible disappears. Yet internally something significant has changed. A possibility that once felt certain no longer exists. The mind must reorganize itself around a new understanding, and that process can be surprisingly painful. There is another reason people cling to expectations so tightly. Expectations often provide a sense of emotional security. Predictability feels safe. Believing that someone will always behave in a certain way creates the impression of stability. The mind relaxes when it thinks it knows what comes next. But life rarely offers that level of certainty. People change, circumstances change, emotions fluctuate, priorities shift. Even well-intentioned individuals sometimes act inconsistently. Expecting perfection from human beings is essentially expecting them to stop being human. The Stoic approach was never about becoming pessimistic or distrustful. It was about understanding reality deeply enough that disappointment loses its ability to dominate the mind. Acceptance does not mean lowering standards. It means refusing to build emotional stability on assumptions that cannot be guaranteed. Over time, a subtle shift begins to occur. Instead of asking whether people will become who we hope they become, we begin paying attention to who they consistently show themselves to be. Instead of investing all our energy in imagined futures, we learn to observe present realities. This does not make life colder. In many ways, it makes relationships more honest. Appreciation becomes rooted in what exists rather than what might someday exist. Respect becomes grounded in evidence rather than wishful thinking. Trust becomes something earned through repeated action rather than granted through imagined potential. And perhaps this is where genuine peace begins. Not when reality finally matches our expectations, but when our expectations become aligned with reality itself. If this reflection is helping you see people, relationships, and even yourself a little more clearly, consider subscribing. Wisdom rarely arrives through a single insight. It grows through repeated reflection. Perhaps the reason expectations become so powerful is that uncertainty feels uncomfortable. The human mind naturally searches for order. It wants clear answers, predictable outcomes, and stable conclusions. When it encounters complexity, it often tries to simplify it. People become labels. Situations become categories. Someone is trustworthy or untrustworthy, strong or weak, honest or dishonest. The mind finds relief in these distinctions because they create the feeling that reality is understandable and therefore manageable. Yet life rarely conforms to such neat divisions. The longer a person observes human behavior honestly, the more difficult it becomes to place anyone into a single category. Most individuals are mixtures of strengths and weaknesses, virtues and flaws, confidence and insecurity. The challenge is not that people are difficult to understand. The challenge is that they are often more complex than we want them to be. This complexity can feel frustrating because it forces us to live without complete certainty. A person may be generous in one season of life and self-centered in another. Someone may show remarkable courage under one circumstance and retreat into fear under a different one. Even the qualities people are most proud of can disappear when pressure increases. This does not necessarily make them dishonest. It makes them human. The monk understood that character is not a fixed monument standing untouched by circumstance. It is something that must be continually practiced and reinforced. A person may possess wisdom and still make foolish decisions. They may value honesty and still find themselves tempted by self-preservation. The existence of one quality does not erase the possibility of its opposite. Yet many disappointments occur because we unconsciously assume otherwise. Part of the difficulty comes from admiration. Admiration has a tendency to narrow perception. When people deeply respect someone, they often focus on the traits they appreciate while ignoring everything else. A kind person becomes kindness itself. A disciplined person becomes a symbol of discipline. A confident individual becomes the embodiment of certainty. The image grows larger than the reality. What began as appreciation slowly becomes idealization. The mind selects certain details and builds an identity around them. The rest fades into the background. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. In many cases, idealization becomes one more way of avoiding reality. A person who demonstrates confidence is assumed to be free from doubt. Yet these assumptions often say more about the observer than the person being observed. The mind fills empty spaces with conclusions because uncertainty feels incomplete. Instead of accepting that there are aspects of another person we do not fully understand, we create answers. Those answers provide comfort for a time. Eventually, reality begins supplying its own. When that happens, many people feel betrayed by the contradiction. They discover the patient person becomes impatient, the supportive friend becomes distant, the reliable colleague becomes inconsistent. Suddenly, the image fractures. Yet the contradiction existed long before it was noticed. Human beings have always carried competing impulses within them. Strength exists beside weakness, confidence exists beside fear, generosity exists beside self-interest. The Stoics never viewed this as a flaw unique to certain individuals. They saw it as part of the human condition itself. Every person is engaged in an ongoing struggle between competing tendencies. Some manage those tendencies more effectively than others, but nobody escapes them entirely. Recognizing this can change the way disappointments are interpreted. Instead of seeing every contradiction as evidence that someone has become a different person, it becomes possible to see that multiple aspects of their character existed simultaneously. One side simply remained hidden until circumstances revealed it. Pressure has a way of exposing what comfort conceals. Stress reveals weaknesses. Success reveals character. Loss reveals priorities. Time reveals patterns. As Shaolin master reminded himself, the soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts. Under pressure, people often reveal not who they suddenly become, but who they have been all along beneath the surface. None of these experiences create entirely new qualities. They bring existing qualities into view. This perspective does not excuse harmful behavior, nor does it require lowering standards. It simply encourages a more realistic understanding of human nature. There is a certain freedom that comes from accepting this reality. Expectations become less rigid. Perception becomes more balanced. Instead of searching for flawless people, attention shifts toward understanding people as they are. This allows appreciation without illusion. Someone can be admired without being idealized. They can be respected without being placed on a pedestal. Their strengths can be acknowledged without denying their weaknesses. In many ways, this creates healthier relationships because it removes the burden of perfection. Nobody is forced to maintain an impossible image. Perhaps this leads to a more important realization. The question is not why people sometimes disappoint us. Human beings have always been imperfect. The deeper question is why we expected them to be free from contradiction at all. Once that expectation begins to dissolve, a different kind of understanding emerges. One rooted not in fantasy or judgment, but in observation. And from that place, relationships become less about managing expectations and more about seeing clearly. Once a person begins paying attention to patterns instead of isolated moments, the way they see other people starts to change. At first, the shift is subtle. Nothing dramatic happens. There is no sudden revelation that transforms every relationship overnight. Instead, there is a gradual movement away from impressions and toward observation. Words still matter, but they no longer carry the same authority they once did. Promises become less persuasive than behavior. Intentions become less important than actions. What people repeatedly do begins to matter more than what they occasionally say. This change can feel uncomfortable because it removes many of the shortcuts the mind prefers to use. It is easier to trust a convincing explanation than to patiently observe a pattern. It is easier to believe a promise than to wait for evidence. Yet time has a way of revealing truths that appearances can temporarily conceal. The monk placed great importance on what people consistently practiced because they understood that character is not measured by isolated moments. Anyone can behave well under favorable conditions. Anyone can display patience when nothing is testing them. Anyone can appear generous when generosity requires little sacrifice. Character becomes visible when circumstances become difficult. It reveals itself in repetition. A person who repeatedly chooses honesty when dishonesty would be easier demonstrates something meaningful. A person who consistently accepts responsibility rather than shifting blame reveals a quality that cannot be faked forever. These patterns may not attract immediate attention because they develop slowly, yet they often tell a more accurate story than dramatic gestures or impressive words ever could. This realization changes the way disappointments are interpreted. Instead of focusing on a single incident, attention naturally shifts toward broader trends. One mistake no longer defines a person. Neither does one admirable act. The focus moves toward consistency. Someone who occasionally forgets a commitment is different from someone who repeatedly breaks promises. Someone who loses their temper once under extreme stress is different from someone who consistently uses anger to control situations. The distinction matters because human beings are imperfect. Everyone has moments they regret. Everyone falls short at times. The challenge is learning to distinguish between isolated failures and recurring patterns. That distinction often determines whether perception is grounded in reality or shaped by emotion. As observation deepens, certain truths become difficult to ignore. The friend who only reaches out during moments of need begins to stand out. The person who constantly speaks about loyalty, while repeatedly placing convenience above commitment, becomes easier to understand. The individual who insists they value honesty but reacts defensively whenever confronted with uncomfortable truths reveals a contradiction through repetition. None of these insights emerge from a single conversation. They develop gradually through accumulated evidence. One moment may be dismissed. Several similar moments begin forming a pattern. Eventually, the pattern becomes impossible to overlook. The mind starts recognizing that behavior repeated over time often reveals priorities more clearly than words ever can. Yet this clarity brings with it an unexpected challenge. The more accurately a person sees others, the harder it becomes to avoid seeing themselves with the same level of honesty. Observation is not a skill that remains directed outward forever. Eventually, it turns inward. The same principles used to understand other people begin applying to personal behavior. Suddenly, it becomes difficult to judge others solely by their contradictions, because similar contradictions start appearing closer to home. The desire for recognition, the tendency to avoid discomfort, the habit of justifying certain behaviors while criticizing those same behaviors in someone else. These things often remain hidden until attention becomes more disciplined. The process can feel uncomfortable because most people prefer seeing themselves through the lens of their best moments. They remember times when they acted courageously, generously, or wisely. Yet genuine understanding requires looking at recurring tendencies as well. What happens during stress? What habits emerge when no one is watching? What choices are made repeatedly despite knowing better? As Socrates famously observed, the unexamined life is not worth living. These questions are not designed to create guilt. They are designed to create awareness. Awareness is difficult to achieve when attention remains fixed on isolated examples that support a preferred narrative. Over time, a deeper understanding begins to emerge. Human beings are not defined by what they claim to value. They are gradually revealed through what they repeatedly practice. This applies to friendships, relationships, leadership, and personal development alike. Pros matter because they expose what temporary appearances often hide. They show where discipline is genuine and where it is performative. They reveal whether values are principles or merely preferences. And perhaps most importantly, they encourage a more balanced view of both others and oneself. The clearer these patterns become, the less room there is for illusion. What remains is not cynicism or distrust, but a quieter form of understanding rooted in observation. And from that place, both judgment and admiration become more measured because they are no longer built on assumptions, but on something far more reliable, evidence gathered over time. This is where the process becomes uncomfortable. The same mind that creates simplified stories about other people often creates simplified stories about itself. Most individuals carry an image of who they believe they are. That image is carefully maintained. It highlights strengths and minimizes weaknesses. It focuses on good intentions and overlooks inconvenient patterns. It remembers moments of generosity while forgetting moments of selfishness. It recalls times of courage while quietly pushing fear into the background. None of this is necessarily dishonest. Much of it happens automatically. The mind protects its preferred identity because certainty feels safer than contradiction. Yet reality rarely conforms to the stories people tell themselves. Just as others are more complex than they appear, the same is true within every individual. Marcus Aurelius understood this deeply. Despite possessing immense authority and influence, he spent much of his private writing reminding himself to remain vigilant toward his own weaknesses. He did not assume wisdom made him immune to error. He did not believe good intentions automatically produced good behavior. Instead, he recognized that self-deception often wears the mask of self-confidence. The qualities people criticize in others frequently exist within themselves in different forms. Pride may not look identical from one person to another, neither does insecurity, resentment, envy, or the need for approval. Yet the underlying impulses often share more similarities than people are willing to admit. This realization creates a profound shift in perspective. Judgment begins to soften, not because standards disappear, but because understanding deepens. The person who constantly seeks validation becomes easier to understand when one recognizes their own desire for acceptance. The individual who reacts emotionally becomes less mysterious when one remembers moments when emotions overpowered reason. The colleague who struggles with criticism appears less flawed when one notices the instinct to defend personal mistakes. Suddenly, the distance between observer and observed becomes smaller. Human behavior no longer appears divided into categories of enlightened people and flawed people. Instead, it becomes a spectrum of shared struggles expressed in different ways. There is a certain humility that emerges from this awareness. Not the kind that pretends weakness does not exist, but the kind that acknowledges it honestly. Many people spend years. Perhaps the greatest lesson is this: peace does not come from finding perfect people, perfect circumstances, or perfect certainty. Peace comes from seeing reality clearly. The more we release the need for people to match our expectations, the more we are able to appreciate them for who they truly are. The more we stop judging ourselves by isolated moments and start observing our consistent patterns, the more honest our growth becomes. Life is not asking us to become free from weakness, contradiction, or imperfection. It is asking us to become aware of them, because awareness creates understanding, and understanding creates wisdom. The truth is that people will disappoint us at times. We will disappoint ourselves as well. But disappointment loses much of its power